Hey tankers, in this 13th episode of The Art of Warfare, we review the VFM, a very popular Tier 6 premium light tank in Armored Warfare. The tank has some impressive strengths, but they're balanced by two things. One, the AP penetration is a relatively low 303, and the base accuracy is a very poor 0.17. So, to offset or manage the tank's very poor gun handling, I recommend taking Marksman as your first gunner skill, and then shoot from the hip. I also recommend Smooth Ride, which helps to limit the bloom or increase in reticle size as you're moving, and between those things and augmented breech lock or chrome barrel lining and intercom systems, you can get the accuracy down to a pretty good 0.07 and a reload time of just under 5 seconds. The hull traverse on this tank is pretty poor, meaning it makes kind of wide circles, so I also recommend taking Spin to Win. The real strength of this tank is its frontal armor profile. The frontal hull, when pointed towards your opponent, offers pretty reliable protection against autocannons and most AP rounds. You do have a weak spot here in the driver's viewport, but as long as you're properly hull down or on the move, that can be pretty tough to hit. Really, the biggest vulnerability from a frontal facing is the turret, because you can be reliably penetrated by tanks with AP penetration of about 275 or higher. So you want to keep your hull pointed at your opponent as much as possible and try to wiggle back and forth so they can't get a clean shot on your turret. Now, a lot of VFM drivers play the tank pretty incorrectly, in my opinion. Like, this VFM is trying to force a flank on me when I knew he was coming, and because he takes such wide circles, this is allowing me to hit him multiple times before he's even able to damage me, and he's not able to defeat my turret traverse. So I'm able to keep my turret in pace with him, catch him on fire, and burn him down. So I outland him 3 shots to 1. One nice thing about the VFM when you're facing other light tanks is you can load up heat and bully them. So as long as I'm keeping my hull pointed towards him, you notice I'm moving in and out, and I'm doing this to try to make it hard for him to hit my viewport or the turret, at least give him a moving target, whereas I can hit him anywhere because his tank is very squishy. There are 2 VFMs that are trying to flank a T-72A. The first VFM put himself in position where that's an easy finishing shot for me, and then the second VFM rushes in and he eats 800 damage from me and my ally. And this is what I think a misuse of this tank. A lot of times people will rush in feeling like invulnerable with their armor, but the reality is when you're flanking, if there are other enemies aside from the tank that you're trying to flank, you can put yourself in a really bad position really fast. Now, with the good frontal hull of this tank, what you can do is bully AFVs. The only thing you really need to worry about is they're firing anti-tank guided missiles, which will cut through your tank like butter, but aside from that, autocannons really can't hurt you. And then here's another example of a VFM driver playing his tank incorrectly. He's trying to flank me, and there's really no reason why he needs to do this, and I'm keeping my hull pointed towards him. He's missed a couple shots. I've landed both of mine, and what I'm going to try to do is keep that hull pointed towards him and wiggle in and out so that he doesn't have an easy shot on my turret. And by the time I get this last kill shot of him, every time he shows his side, I just hit him there. I outland him 4 shots to 1. And I would have killed this M2 Bradley as well if I didn't miss that shot right there. But again, a lot of people really put the Vickers in a position where they're forcing the armor to save them. If you play this tank correctly, you can get great results out of it. In the 106 battles it took me to get my crew up to level 5, I was averaging almost 3,100 damage per game and over 2 kills per game. So this is a very capable tank. Let's take a look at it in a Tier 7 pipelines battle. Most of the tanks here are Tier 6, and in this encounter mode from the North Spawn, you have 2 options of where you can go. You can head over to D2, D3 and see if you can get some early shots on their tanks approaching the 0-1 line. The other thing you can do is cross over the river to E5, which is a pretty standard place to go from the North Spawn in standard mode, because the E5 position will allow you to cover tanks moving down the H lane toward the refinery, especially slower MBTs. It'll also allow you to shoot over the reg facing to the west and cover the 0-1 lines. Whenever I cross water, even a faster tank like this, I try to aim for the intermediate islands like that just to make sure I don't drown. It's not going to happen in a tank like this really unless you go across a very wide gap of water because it's pretty fast, but there's no reason to tempt fate. I chose this particular pipelines battle for a couple of reasons. One, it shows several different fields of fire, and most importantly, their AFVs do a very good job of spreading around the map and keeping us constantly spotted. So every time I come into a position where I'm going to have a shot, you're going to see me get lit. And this is good AFV play on their part, and it really emphasizes the point that you don't want to chase your shots. So in this case, the only place I can hit this MBT-70 was the rear of his turret when he was slightly turned. And with the low 303 penetration, I actually can't penetrate him through the middle part of his turret even when it's facing sideways. The only place that I can penetrate him is on the side of his hull where the armor is a little bit thinner. So I get a penetrating shot, but I back down immediately, and my platoon mate Frankie McShanky has a chieftain designated, and he's in a really bad position. If you want to push towards refinery, you've got to do it early, and you have to do it in a tank with decent mobility. And so a tank like the Chieftain is a really poor candidate, especially since they started on the west side of the map, and because he tried to drive across that open kill zone late, he ended up losing the vast majority of his hit points. The better thing to do with a Chieftain is simply to find an area to be hauled down and just sit back and support your friendly tanks, especially since he's tier 5 tank in a mostly tier 6 and tier 7 battle. There is some autocannon fire coming at us from the southeast corner, so we know that at least one of their AFVs is going to be down there. And they have a lot of tanks pushing up the 0 and 1 line, so we're trying to work in some damage here. Again, the real challenge is, every time I poke out for any meaningful length of time, sometimes even before I fire, I'm getting lit. And you don't want to force shots where people know that you're there because you're lit and you're going to poke your turret over, because the turret is the weakest part of this tank's layout from a frontal perspective. That VBL, we get some damage into him, which is really important. That's a very dangerous tank late because it is such a small size and it's pretty agile and can get behind tanks and hit them with their autocannon. I get a nice rear shot on that 2AV. You always want to try to hit tanks in the rear half of their vehicle, especially if you can shoot on the engine or engine deck, because you have the chance of setting them on fire and dealing engine damage. This right here was a little bit foolish of me. As soon as I popped up, I was already lit, so that MBT-70 fired a shot which didn't penetrate. Now granted, the MBT-70 doesn't have a particular accurate gun, but had he penetrated me, the alpha on that gun is pretty painful, and I would have eaten about 500 damage. And the main lesson to this is you really don't want to force situations where you don't have the first shot advantage. Like right here I have the first shot advantage because this MBT-70 is blind as a bat and he doesn't see me until I fire. So what I do is I drop back beneath this rock and beneath this ridge, wait until I'm no longer lit and that the eye is no longer gray. While the eye is gray, you can still be rendered. And then you can see there I get the first shot advantage and I start to pull back and his shot misses me, so I immediately go back and try a second shot. So I'm out trading him 2 shots to 1 and he didn't penetrate me with his 1 shot. Our AFVs, if you go back and you watch this map, they've been misplaying their tanks. They've been sitting too close to the opponents. Now they should have fled east across the river a while ago, and now the enemy tanks are so close that our 3, well now 2 AFVs are going to get spotted by proximity, and the fact that they have good vision and good camo is completely meaningless. And so our tanks in the western half of this map really misplayed it. There is no reason to defend the western half of the map. It's better to concede ground than to give your hit points and get wrecked. Right, and so now I'm spotted, and this is a little bit of an awkward situation. I have an MBT-70 just to the southeast of me, and this Leo 2AV is looking at me, so I move back a little bit, juke a shot, and you can see that shot, the 303 armor-piercing penetration wasn't enough to go through the side of the turret of that 2AV, even though he was facing to the side of me, so I aimed a little bit lower and got it through his side hull. And I got out of the way of that other hull-down 2AV a little bit late, and he got a penetrating shot. Now I popped a smoke to try to, obscure his ability to aim on me, but I still ate a shot. And we've really got to do something pretty dramatic. We've lost the western half of the map badly. We're at a 5 tank deficit. Their most isolated tank is this MBT-70 right in front of us, so Frankie and I are going to push down on him. The one thing about the VFM you have to be careful about is the gun handling is really poor, meaning that its ability to do things like snapshot is also going to be poor because the aiming reticle gets so big due to the gun's poor accuracy, right? Even with, the things that I've put on here, like the chrome barrel lining 3, the intercom, etc. This tank is, the outline is still showing, meaning that shell will go through, but once he goes behind the building, the only way I can hit him is shooting him through the doorway and through a window, right? Kind of like a trick shot. But now his outline isn't showing behind that building, meaning that if I fire, the ammo is going to be eaten by the building. So I'm just waiting for him to turn a little bit to the side there and just miss out on getting a kill shot on him. What we need to do is clear out the southern part of the map. We can't afford to let enemies still sit on us on 3 sides because they will just crush us, especially since we're still down by a 3 tank deficit. And most important thing is I'm partially pushing up on this VFM so he knows that I'm here, because Frankie is one-shottable. Even though the Terminator's turret takes less damage because it is unmanned, anything that hits him is probably going to kill him. Now this VFM is making a bit of a mistake. He really should be concerned about securing the southern side of this flank, or knowing that we're going to push up and try to flank them, because their tanks that were on the western side of the map are probably crossing over somewhere between the A to C lines, right? This Leo 2AV is taking a little bit of a too high a line, and he's very much in a large kill zone for me. And the problem is he can't push past that XM1 who's now blocking him, and I get spotted after firing that shot, but that's fine. It's already too late, and that shell's well on the way before the 2AV can do anything in return. So we've brought this back from a 5 tank deficit. It's now tied, and this BMD2 makes a big mistake. This is a tank with good gun depression, but what he was doing was trying to peek over and use his autocannon, and he really should have backed up or been much more careful spotting. And then a friendly player finishes off the VFM. I get a nice leading shot there on the MPT-70, spin him around, and there's just a sliver of his lower plate showing, and I hit him through that. And then as he starts to turn to his right or my left, I aim that shot there, hoping to hit the side of his turret, but it doesn't penetrate. And then as he's diagonally heading to my left, I hit him through his side armor. So, the main important thing about this is just to make sure to be disciplined about pointing your hull. This is a great tank for flexing. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a great tank for flanking because of the poor hull traverse, and you don't want to give up your sides. Like, there's some light tanks where they don't have any meaningful armor anywhere, so, it doesn't matter which part of your tank you're exposing so much. Whereas with this tank, it really matters. If you're exposing your side, you're negating the value of your strong frontal hull armor. Right, so you want to make sure that you are being disciplined about when you flank and how you do it. Do it the way that I've shown in this video. Don't do it like the other people who were doing it earlier, where they're just giving free shots. So I ended up contributing about 5,400 damage along with a handful of spots, and this was actually the battle that I got my crew. This is the 106 battle that got them up to level 5 crew. So it's maxed out now, which is great because you've got the full complement of skills and the stats are going to be as dialed in as they can. And here I had 1,200 damage mitigated. In the next video, we're going to take a look at the T-72, which was the most requested tank based on a poll on Reddit. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your comments and feedback, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.